Well, thank you very much, Ariane, for kicking the events of today, and greetings everyone. And thank you so much for joining today's event. And I hope you're all doing safe. My name is Simon Aboud and I'm leading the real estate and construction team at Plug and Play. And I'm currently tuned in from Brussels, Belgium. And so basically, most likely a lot of you in the audience are now joining from home. I know I do, and as well as some of the speakers today on the panel. And maybe your company has already also offered possibilities allowing you to partially get back to your offices again. However, we all know that our new certainty is that more than ever, uncertainty is the new norm. And for our audience working, for example, in the corporate real estate world, you might be in the midst of constantly redefining the most adequate strategies for your company. If you're on the workplace design side, you're most probably trying to come up with new logical design solutions to cope up with the new regulations. As for the real estate developers and real estate investors present today, you might be asking yourself, what will be the next great product on the market in both offices, maybe residential as well, particularly with flexible working policies, etc. And I guess you understood that the list can go on across industries and across geographies. But this is why I'm really thrilled to be today's moderator with you, as I'll be hosting 4 unique, globally renowned personalities in the world of space making, space management, and of course, innovation. So diving now into our panel, I'm really honored to be welcoming first Scott Ekman, who's the Global Senior Director of Corporate Real Estate Strategy and Planning at Adobe. Second, I'm delighted to really welcome to our table Sam Nunes, who's the member of the American Institute of Architects, lead accredited professional, as well as the president and founding partner at WRNS Studio. I'm also really glad to welcome third on our panel, Jeff Arriaga, Vice Chairman of Newmark Knight Frank, but also co-founder of Urban Community Initiative. And to complete our roundtable, I'm delighted to also welcome Gary Delabo, Managing Partner at Navitas Capital and co-founder as well with Jeff of Urban Community Initiative back in Silicon Valley. And so without further ado, I see that we have Scott and Jeff on the video. I would invite Sam and Gary to join as well. If you can unlock your videos and sound. You're more than welcome. Voilà. Perfect. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. It's really an honor to have you tuned in today. And so basically to start here, I would love to jump in directly into the discussion. And I would like to start with Scott.
Yes.
You're heading the whole corporate real estate aspect of Adobe globally, a company with more than 20,000 employees spread across the globe. And I was wondering, how smooth did this transition go in general? Basically with this whole pandemic coming, and maybe my question would be divided into 2 parts. How smooth did it go on the people side? And how did it go on the real estate strategy side as well?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And happy to be here and join this group. It was a little bit of a surprise. We had about 10% of our population or so that worked remotely prior to the pandemic. March 9th, we shut pretty much everything down globally. And the 23,000 employees and 10 or 11,000 contract workers all went home, like most of us here. And it was very smooth. We provisioned, everyone with laptops, cell phones, and folks it was very smooth from a transition to get folks at home. Sure, there were some problems here and there, but for vast majority of employees were highly effective pretty quickly. And from a real estate strategy, we really just held on almost everything. We've had a few leases over the course that have expired, and we've done a number of deals in the midst of this as well. So we're just kind of carrying on with real estate strategy pretty much the way we had prior, just without a lot of growth.
Right. Okay, interesting. And I mean, I've heard also that you guys kicked off the construction of the new Adobe HQ back in San Jose a year ago, I think.
Yes.
So we were wondering, like, how much did this pandemic actually impact maybe the rethinking of this project?
Sure. Yeah, it stopped construction for about 6 weeks. And that was because of some local orders to shelter in place, but that was lifted again later in the spring, and so we're carrying on with the core and shell construction that we were carrying on before. We've slowed any of the interior design until we have a little more time to figure out what the interiors are going to look like, what the workplace of the future really needs to be. And so we're doing a lot of research right now and a lot of discussion with leadership around what that might look like. But we'll get started on that as soon as we get a little more clarity.
Right. And I think, I mean, to move towards workplace design, I think we have a great panelist here who would be able to tell us more, Sam Nunes. So basically, Sam, you're the founder and currently leading one of the most successful architecture practice located back on the West Coast, which was awarded with a lot of awards, but mostly and most recently with the top 5 most innovative architecture companies in the world by Fast Company earlier this year. So that's very interesting. And I was wondering also, how did it go with your company? So I think you have around 200 employees working remote. So I was wondering on the architecture side and workplace design side, where creativity is quite key and collaboration is quite key. I was wondering how affected did you guys were with this pandemic and having to work remotely?
Yeah, there are 200 of us. We're located actually in 4 places across the United States. So we're in San Francisco, New York, Seattle, and Hawaii, and we build our project teams out of all of those folks, no matter where they are. So we had already adopted most of the online collaborative tools. We were used to working, some folks out of San Francisco, some out of Seattle, some out of New York or Hawaii on a single project. So we had already had, not only the technologies, but the experience of doing that, and people were used to it. And there was a real momentum going into the pandemic for us. And so there was lots to do. And people could say fairly focused, during that time. Obviously there were distractions. We implemented different, collaborative techniques, in terms of even leadership, speaking directly to our entire staff on a weekly basis, keeping them informed as to what was happening both globally with the pandemic and internally with our own business. So it's actually been a fairly smooth transition. The issues for us are what comes next. So as new work is brought online and new teams are built, forming those relationships to push work forward creatively is something we're just muddling through and learning how to do.
Okay, cool. I mean, and from what I've also seen, I mean, you're working with some of the most of the big tech companies back in Silicon Valley, which is quite impressive. So I was wondering if there would be any new trends that your clients are actually coming up with now that we're seeing this kind of transition for the past couple of months, and what they might be looking for, what type of spaces, or.
Yeah, we've been engaged. Yeah, with a few of our clients on what I would call pandemic planning. In other words, there's a certain amount of their workforce still in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So there's been a reimagining of that workplace for them. Fairly easy to create social distance, different graphics and all things to keep people well and healthy. And so we've done a bit of that for a few of our clients. And then we've been imagining what the future might be post-pandemic. In the main, after months of working with these folks, in the main, not a whole lot different than what it was pre-pandemic in terms of densities, the use of real estate. There is a bit of thought around an emphasis on collaborative space and a de-emphasis on desking. but that really sort of exists on the margins. Most of our clients are seeing, their real estate needs to remain about the same. And very few, if any, of our projects, some have gone on a bit of a stall, as Scott just discussed, but in the main, most things are moving forward. And projects that are to come online 2, 3, 4 years from now are really in the heat of design right now.
Right. Okay, cool. And maybe to do the transition to the pure demand and the demand and supply side. I mean, Jeff, in your case, you also have a very impressive career behind you, and now you're the vice chairman at Newmark Knight Frank, having worked with clients such as SAP, Siemens, Blackstone, Heinz, among the very few. So my question would be around, I mean, since you have so much industry knowledge, I was wondering, how is Newmark Knight Frank currently seeing the demand or the supply changes? Especially, I mean, let's say maybe on the West Coast as a global trend.
Thanks, Simone. Yeah, it's been an interesting time, at least from the brokerage standpoint. Again, we track activity in the Valley.
I think
we're probably tracking between 7 and 10 million square feet of requirements. Not all of those requirements will actually transact, but it's more of a trend that we have followed. But what we're seeing right now, the pause button is definitely on in the Valley. I mean, the numbers that we're tracking now are like 1.2 to 1.6 million square feet of requirements. A lot of the companies that we were tracking, we just have them on hold right now. So I think everyone's just kind of looking for some more guidance from companies like Scott's, who, larger companies, how are they going to reintegrate into the workforce, the Googles of the world. So, from at least the brokerage standpoint, it's kind of a very unique time that it's, our business is generated on leasing space. And at this time, the volume has gone down substantially. I would say the good news, though, is the difference between the Silicon Valley and say San Francisco. I think the Silicon Valley has more established companies. So the impact in regards to say sublease space on the marketplace is not as great as up in San Francisco. So currently there's about 7 million square feet of sublease space up in San Francisco. In the Silicon Valley, it's roughly 2 million square feet at this time. So I think we're faring a lot better just because of the established companies in the Valley.
Okay, interesting. And then maybe regarding that, since you're saying that the whole industry is on pause, at least on the West Coast, do you have any, or are you seeing with your team any kind of time frame as per when perhaps we could see some kind of unlocking, especially that from what we've been seeing on the market, tech solutions have been starting to be implemented in real estate. So basically we are able to finally measure what's happening within our real estate assets. So I don't know if you might have any time frame in mind regarding that.
I'm not sure about a time frame, but our San Jose office has been tracking since March kind of activity levels. So we do a Survey Monkey each week on inquiries on tours, LOI, executed leases. And actually in August, there was a little bit of a tick up. So, I mean, that is probably the most positive. It's not, it's not going to move the needle, but again, it's at least a positive trend. I think now September, kids are back in school, if you really call that back in school, working and having school from home. Right. But more the attorneys are around, more the executives are more available. Again, this is historically just because people have been on vacation. But this next month, I think will be really interesting to see if we see this continued, slight rise in activity in the Valley.
Okay, cool, nice. I mean, that's definitely very interesting, and I mean, thank you, Jeff. And maybe that would be finally to Gary. I mean, you're an expert into everything around technology and the built environment. You were leading the environment efforts at eBay as a general manager of corporate environmental affairs back then. And then you actually moved to smart buildings and energy efficiency practice at Wesley Group. And now as a managing director at Navitas Capital, one of the leading real estate and construction focused venture capital in the Bay Area and in the world. I was wondering, what were the current topics that are currently trending in innovation, in technology, maybe around real estate mostly, since the pandemic started?
Yeah, Simone, I'd actually take a step back and,
Sure.
as opposed to giving you specific, examples of some technologies, I think there's some broader trends that we need to be thinking about, right? And to me, as you look at the real estate sector and whether it's developers or technology companies, I think one of the things that we have to do is help answer some questions that companies like Scott are having. I think that lots of firms are trying to figure out if they come back, how they come back, when they come back, and what they come back to. And I think our real belief is that we're trying to create an environment that's compelling. I think a lot of us have learned that you can be very efficient from home, but there's a certain hollowness to that experience. I also think if you're trying to hire and build teams and have collaboration and compete on a global scale, this kind of a work environment just not going to be as efficient as we like it to be over the long term. But I think, what people certainly don't want to be involved with is a 2.5 hour, 3 hour commutes. And I think they don't want to come back to cities that, feel hollow like a home. Are they safe? Is the community policing something that, is going to start to take hold in some of our cities? So our goal is really think about, at the end of the day, a user experience that people have, and that user experience spans a multitude of experiences. One is, where do people live? How do they get back and forth to work? What's their work environment like? And, what's their nightlife or their lunch times like as well? So those are the kind of things where we focus time and effort. And, I think that it's important for us all to recognize, especially in the development community, that we have to demonstrate to these tech companies or to the retailers in these areas that we care, and that we're going to do a better job. And we're just not going to build glass boxes, and we're going to help retailers work through these difficult times. And so that's something that Jeff and I spend a lot of time on, is really reaching out to the community. And we actually put together a nonprofit to help these retailers, during this time. And, we reached out to Scott, and Scott was one of the first guys to raise his hand and say, hey, listen, how do I help? So it's for us to create user experiences, to come together as a community. And then I think you're going to see, technologies around air quality and noise quality, and, how do people get into buildings without, touching things? I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of these very tactical technologies that you'll see starting to take some traction. But at the end of the day, what I hope is that we're able to create great user experiences that people really value and, are excited to come back to work and back to a downtown environment.
I agree, and I remember during our first call where I think, Scott, you were mentioning about the new reason behind actually moving from your home to maybe to the office. And this is where it's going to be very interesting, where before we used to have this kind of one size fit all. So basically you enter this company, this is basically the rules you follow, but now there is more emphasis into the interest of the employee, of the person and community in general. It will be more one size fit one. And trying to find actually this kind of solution for every single person, or at least groups of person, for sure. And maybe regarding that, you were mentioning about your initiative back in San Jose. So basically urban communities. I've seen that currently, you're thinking of developing a very big project back in San Jose. So basically you were able to acquire very how do you call this, iconic buildings back in the center of San Jose to redevelop and relaunch the center as a city. I was wondering if you guys, maybe Jeff or Gary, could maybe discuss a little bit more what exactly you're trying to achieve there.
Hey, Jeff, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I would say over the last almost roughly 3 years ago, we kind of started looking at downtown, and me personally, and I think Gary can say the same, there was really no motivation to come to downtown San Jose. It was one of those cities outside of Adobe kind of going down there and leading the charge, I think, for everyone else. It was kind of, the stepsister. No one really, it never took the push. But we started looking at all the great dynamics that are around San Jose, especially downtown San Jose. World-class airport, you've got the university that's got 35,000 students there, you have a sports team, you have great weather, you have BART coming down there, Google now has announced they will come down there. So we just kind of looked at more of a larger kind of a ground plane for us to play in, and looked at San Jose not necessarily as a real estate transaction, but truly how to build a community. And as Gary mentioned before, we started a nonprofit. We spent a lot of time with PATH, they're the advocates for the homeless, and really understanding what happens with the city. And we realize, this it's a long-term process. But what we're trying to do is really kind of fill in kind of like the smaller things. As Gary mentioned, the retailers, it's like we're willing to spend capital to put into these spaces to help these younger operations, get going. I mean, they don't have $100,000, they don't have $20,000 to put into, tenant improvements to get them up and going. So again, I mean, we're looking at things, I would say smaller, and then kind of growing on a larger picture.
Yeah, I know. Listen, Simon, I would just add to that, kind of going back to what I said earlier, is that, again, I think this is becoming more about, less about transactions, at least in my opinion, because I think real estate is really a transaction-oriented business, and trying to create, experiences and demonstrate to people, that you're thinking about them, that you really understand their needs, that you're listening. And we all know in business, if you can do a good job of listening, you can usually come up with better solutions. I think it's going to be a fascinating time to take a place like San Jose, because San Jose is not all that unique, but what makes cities like Denver, what makes cities like Nashville all of a sudden explode to be these places that people want to go to? And is there some kind of secret sauce that kind of makes that happen? Affordable housing certainly something that's on everyone's mind. So, again, as we're kind of looking at these experiences, you look at transportation, and whether it's vertical transportation, you need to get companies like the Toyotas and the Mercedes involved in your conversations and looking at their technologies and how you can leverage them and how they can leverage you. And then you have to be working with, people like Scott and understanding his needs, and then people like Sam who says, all right, I hear what you guys are talking about. Now, how do we make these things, come to life? So that's kind of, what we're trying to do, is that not just look at point solutions in the sector, but really trying to have a holistic vision and come up with something that people are inspired by. Like live in this, just so you guys know, living in Silicon Valley is a challenge. It's extraordinarily expensive, and people commute far more than they want to, but it's extraordinarily exciting as well. And our hope is that can we create the kind of experience these technology companies deserve to continue their leadership in the world, to really dominate some of these markets by making sure they don't have to think about real estate, they don't have to think about affordable housing, that we can take those things on for them.
I think Gary, I think that these companies are seeing that too. There's quite a number of companies now that are moving real estate as a transaction out of the realm of finance and the CFO. They're moving it over to their human resources. They see it more as an experience, in a way for the company to create a relationship between company and employee. So they're moving the reporting up of what's going on in workplace is happening through human resource and not finance.
Yep, we do. Yeah, we've been that way for a while. Just focused on employee experience is critical, and that's what Gary, you and I've talked about in a lot of your projects. And what you're aiming for is how do you create a great experience, and people will desire to be there.
And Scott, what are you hearing from kind of rank and file employees? What do you think they really want at the end of the day?
Well, for us, Adobe has a very rich culture around community, around sense of belonging. Cohesion and affiliation to the brand and to fellow employees is a core to the company. And so our team really looks at how can we continue to design environments that enhance those opportunities for employees to connect with each other, to be inclusive in different ways of working, in different needs and desires of employees, and just support employees to have a great experience. We believe that will lead to engagement. Engagement will lead to innovation, and good things to happen.
Yeah, Gary, we're seeing employers often offering choice. We've talked about that in the past, but creative workforce is looking for choice. And so I even think, if you take it all the way out, I think the idea of, working from home, working from the office, and seeing that as an either or is really more of an and. It's just the choices that employers are going to allow their employees to make, because there's a generosity there, there's a respect there for the creative workforce that they're trying to attract and retain, but also just enable to do their best work. And that employee, their team, they can decide how to get that done. And so offering those choices in the workplace, but also just in policy, is where this whole thing is headed.
Maybe a quick question for you, Scott. You were talking about new types of dynamic, especially with having an employee-centered type of strategy. Have you seen some kind of new or more emphasized collaboration, let's say, with the head of HR, with the CIO, with the head of corporate real estate, especially if we're talking about working from home? I don't know if you've seen, some kind of changes. I mean, I know that Adobe is quite forward-looking already at the beginning, but yeah.
Well, I mean, in terms of us shifting to home, we wanted to ensure that employees had not only the equipment they needed to be productive, but the equipment they needed to be healthy and safe at home, right? With ergonomic and the right kind of provisioning to enable folks. And I just think that going.
I think you muted yourself.
I'm sorry. Just as Gary, not Gary, what Sam suggested is that we do think that sort of a hybrid model is probably the way most organizations will end up, where this flexibility to have some choice in where you work is going to be pretty important going forward. I think that there's just a spectrum. You have some folks that really desire to be in the office, either because they need to be productive, or because they desire to be because they want to be around others. Or they don't have a home environment that can be conducive to their work. And you equally have folks that have found that working from home is highly effective and productive for them. And then you have this big group in the middle that wants some flexibility. And we don't really know where those will end up, right? I mean, we will probably build programs that support how people make those choices, but I don't think we can predict right now what percentages fall into the different categories until we understand more about how long folks may be at home and how safe employees feel coming back to the office.
Right.
It's funny, Scott, you mentioned the ergonomics. I mean, we had pretty much all the technologies in place. We had to help some people, strengthen their Wi-Fi's and things like that. But I think we spent the most time shipping ergonomic chairs and sit-stand desks because we realized these people were working for us and they were just sort of leaning on dining room chairs trying to do their work. So we were just, we were mostly focused on employee health when this thing took off.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, I'm in my bed right now. That's why I have this backdrop on.
Oh, exactly. I mean, that just isn't healthy, Gary. Come on.
My back has been sore. It's been sore.
Oh, great. I mean, and maybe to go back actually to a point, I think Gary mentioned the idea of community to have a cross industry, really some kind of collaboration, whether, okay, you're a real estate developer, you just don't just build and hope that someone gets in. Now you really need to step up as a building owner, and especially when you talk about offices and the changes of how do you call this, of habits, where now before everyone would wake up at 7, 6, go to drop their kids, with going back to the you have a lot of time commuting, dropping your kid, commuting to work, commuting back to get your kids and get back to home. I was really wondering, I mean, because I've heard some interesting concept back at Cornet Global Hackathon, where, for example, instead of moving all the way so you'd be dropping your kid and having those new types of mixes where you'd be having some kind of flexible work within schools. where basically you cut this kind of so creating a new type of community at a smaller level. I don't know if you guys are envisioning a future where, yeah, I mean, definitely it's obviously more than home or office, but where there'd be some kind of in-between of spaces.
Well, I think, Stan talks a lot about, some of the needs of employees. And one of the issues is around control, where, you just want to have a little control in your life. And I think that, as offices became more dense and the WeWork model became more prevalent, that the only control you really had over your space was hanging out in a small little phone booth, and which was unhealthy and unfulfilling. I mean, Jeff and I were in a WeWork space for a number of months, and just if you have one noisy neighbor, it just feels like you lose control over your day. It just is this kind of odd experience. And the second you're home, you have a little more control over that, right? You lose a lot of things because of it. But ultimately, I think we've got to find ways to kind of create these environments where people really feel like, they can be creative, they can be in control, they can be efficient. And, to me, school is one of those, right? I think it's terrible when you have to, drop your kid off and they have that school play and you just know you can't spend 35 minutes commuting there and 35 minutes back. So you're going to have to miss that. We have to start creating environments where, you can live where you work, where you buy, it's kind of a marketplace, and hopefully your kids' schools are there. So you don't have to be, running around and spending half your life in a car. Those are the kind of things I think Europeans do far better than we do in North America. And so as we're looking at a place like San Jose, we really want to try to take that into account, because I think that education is one of the things that's fundamental to our democracy moving forward. If people are educated, they can make really poor decisions, and you want to be part of those kids' experiences. And the way we work today, especially in the Silicon Valley, they're completely disconnected.
That's fair point. I don't know, Sam, if on your case, I mean, you're working obviously on different types of construction projects and then projects in general, from K-12 schools to everything. So I don't know if you've seen something like that coming, or it's not really yet a model.
Well, I mean, I agree with Gary. For me, it's employers, myself, our clients, we need to help by giving choice, as I discussed before. Right. We allow people to manage their lives, to optimize their time. And we know they have an obligation, to us, to the organizations they work for, but they have other obligations as well. And so we just need to give them the tools they need. We need our HR policies to reflect the fact that they live complicated lives, each of them very different. Or employees with small children have certain pressures. They don't always want to be home, to be honest. There's great distractions there. I would say they're the most distracted of our employees, and what I hear from our clients, they're under the most pressure, right? Now, it's true that schools are closed, or sometimes they're open and sometimes they're closed. That creates its own dynamic. So I would imagine that will improve when there's something more stable exists, when routines can be normalized in people's lives. But I would say even pre-pandemic, our staff with small children probably spend no more than 6 or 7 hours in the office, and there are many days where they just can't come in. And that's okay, because our role is these are really talented, creative people, and we like them as a part of our team. And so how do we help them, manage their time and their day? And we see sometimes those same parents will log on at 10 at night and work for a couple of hours, or, don't come into the office until 10, and that's okay. As long as we're doing what we intend to do, right, as a team. And so the same is true, I think, with most creative and not the knowledge workforce. That's going to be true for them as well. And it is it's a blessing for us, to be honest. I mean, and not every worker can do that, can do what we can do. Mm-hmm. At some levels, I've said our ability to work from home, to work through this pandemic, to stay productive and creative, it comes along with a little sense of guilt, because we know out there's so many people who can't do that. and they're really struggling. And there's a lot of sadness and grief in the world right now. And so I'm just hoping to get clear of all of this, just so that, you know, the larger sense of what a workforce is can feel more healthy, can feel more productive, you know, and engaged. We're the people on the phone right now, we're able to remain engaged in what we love to do. And so, yeah, I mean, we just need to maximize people's ability to do that, you know, in the various industries we represent.
And Gary alluded to this earlier. I think one of the biggest thing I think during this pandemic is people are starting to realize the amount of time people were spending in their cars that was wasted. And now they have the opportunity to spend time with their families. And it's something that I think, you know, people are going to start looking at as do you want to commute to that company that, you know, you were literally spending 2 hours of your day and spending those 2 hours or an hour and a half with, you know, with your family. So I think people will definitely start, as we come back, start thinking about that a lot more.
And Simona, I think that just the last, you know, finer point on this is that, you know, again, to me, it's transactions versus, you know, user experiences. And, you know, dropping your kid off at school and picking them up and ushering them in your car and getting them home as fast as you can or off to soccer practice, that's a series of transactions. If you're able to walk your kid to school, drop them off, say hello to the teacher, come back and see a play and kind of pick them up in a less hurried environment, those become user experiences. Those are things that people care about. And I think that's where, you know, technology is important. That's what we need to be driving, you know, using to make us more efficient. But we have to realize that at the end of the day, you know, iPhone is no more than you know, to me, it's a real estate platform. It's just metal and glass. And that's all these buildings are. And then how do we build great user experiences on top of them?
It's a very good point. I mean, I love what you guys mentioned, and for sure, I mean, community making and finally having all the different types of stakeholders working together and being aligned to create a better cities in general. Because I think that at this point it could not really get worse. So actually it's really inspiring for sure. And I really hope that this pandemic is going to, I mean, just like today we have, I mean, experts from every field that know each other, that work each other, that understand how each other think. I think this is definitely the future, rather than just being an expert in one thing. They're siloed and we're not going anywhere. So yeah, no, I mean, it's really great. Now, I think we're getting the time for questions from the public. We have around 10 minutes of questions. Let's check on the chat. So one question for Sam, which is basically, how might the experience of office be different in 5 years than it is today?
God, if I knew that.
Yeah,
right. With every project we do, you know, for these, I mean, we do a lot of workplace for big tech. We do a lot of workplace for big tech. And every project we do for every one of them, it's an exploration of what comes next. We're just launching into 400,000 feet for Google in San Jose, and the first words out of their mouth was, let's do something different. Let's optimize for us, which is going to begin with how to make, you know, that workforce, you know, more healthy, more happy, more productive, more creative. And so we just talk about that. Like, what did we learn from the last projects? I mean, our own projects and others. What have we learned, and how do we apply that? So you know, I know this pandemic has created this moment in time, and there's going to be some real changes to workplace coming out of it for sure that are a reaction to this pandemic. But there are always changes in workplace. Every project is a change from the last. And so currently what I'm hearing is, you know, and these companies all have different desking densities, and all of that accrues to how they build their teams, how they build their workforce. And obviously it's also a real estate consideration, how many square foot per FTE, all of those kinds of things. Most of them are saying they're going to be about where they were, but they may reconfigure how they amenitize that desking in terms of collaborative space and how they create other places to work. In part, I mean, that's about creating more healthful environments, to be sure. in part it's just learning, you know, what makes their folks more creative and more productive, happier and healthier. So that's kind of where I see it. I just see it as incremental change. And again, there may be a large step here coming out of the pandemic, but it's just a continuing of what's been happening for, you know, decades now in workplace, which is just optimizing for the employee experience.
Mhm.
Right. And I don't know if you guys, Jeff, Scott, or Gary, you'd like to add anything to what Sam mentioned.
Well, I think Sam's right. One thing that that the pandemic has done, right, is it's got us thinking, and I'm sure Sam thinking about this, is that the default used to be, for at least for our company, default was you just went to the office. That's what you did. You go to the office. That's where you meet your colleagues. You do your individual work. You do your team work. You visit. You eat together. And I think that the little bit of the shift, and it's maybe a nuance, maybe it's more important, is people will have a reason to come to the office now that will be different than just the default of coming to do work. They're coming for a reason. The reason is for the most part going to be because they need to collaborate with others. They want to see others in a different way. And so we're just trying to rethink, you know, what does the work environment then need to be if people are coming primarily for collaboration? Is it more of that activity-based setting and less of the individual workspaces?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. But there's a different reason, right, that people are coming in, or maybe it's a specific reason people come in, and that's probably primarily to engage face to face with other people.
I think that's right.
I think I should also say, if you're looking for an experience of having a great Pokeball, go to Adobe.
Yeah, the Pokeball is very, very good.
Great. Here we have another question, also an interesting one. Basically asking basically the pandemic has decreased the demand for office space and retail space. Obviously, as you mentioned, Jeff, for a moment, nobody really knows what's going to come next. Do you guys see that office space is being repurposed for other reasons? So as large employers are going digital by default, we've seen a lot of big tech companies saying that, well, we'll cut our real estate footprint. So yeah, the question is basically, have you seen some kind of new interesting repurposing of those kind of real estate assets?
I have not on the office side of things, but what you're seeing is more from a data center standpoint. There's a lot of data centers that are being constructed, say in Santa Clara, so older, less dense buildings are torn down. And then also from like Amazon. Amazon is just gobbling up any big box retail or warehouse buildings just for the distribution centers. So I think those are probably the kind of, I would say, not repurposing, but kind of like the drivers right now for kind of like maybe repurposing some of these facilities in the Silicon Valley.
Okay, and fair enough. Sam, anything here that you see?
I think in general, just take the pandemic aside. In general, I think there's great inefficiency in the things that we built. I think we'll see that in parking structures pretty quickly. And it's just for many years, I've just felt that we build an awful lot and we use it very inefficiently. So as the population grows and there's more and more of us on this planet, I think we're going to be using the things we build much more efficiently. And I've been doing some thinking around that, how that can be true. And part of that has to do even with equity in our society, like who has access to what and why do they have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you're asking, do we see, with all this empty office space now, has there been any repurposing of it? No, not in the short term, but I think, I don't know, I think over the coming decades, we'll start to see a greater efficiency of use in the things that we build.
And Simone, one thing that you just might want to consider is the not just the repurposing of office space, but I think there's also kind of the repurposing of certain workflows. And what I mean by that is that, we all know how long it takes to build buildings. It takes far too long. And, there's numerous reasons for that. But, some, like one specifically is just getting inspections and working with the planning department, the building department. And, one of we're investors in a company called Open Space. And I think that, now as an inspector, as opposed to seeing 3 sites a day and having to drive around and get in, construction elevators, that if we can help them look at, information, and they can see 10 sites now, and they'll have, historical information that they go back to and look at, can that start to move some of these processes forward? I think there's a real interesting opportunity for us to help cities because they're doing things they never thought they could do. And I'll give you an example, like the county of Santa Clara said, they did a study on people working remotely 2 years ago, and they said it was impossible. They go, we just can't do it. It's too hard. It's going to take too long. And lo and behold, they did it in a month, for a huge organization. So, this might be a time, when you're working with different constituencies, like a community, like a city, to have them try to look at technologies and look at different workflows to make things more efficient. Because ultimately, when it takes 4 years or 3 years to build a building, we're addressing a need that we think is going to be there in 4 years, but it just takes too long to really have that materialize. So we got to get better and do things more quickly.
Agreed. No, it's a very interesting point, especially now where 4 years is such a long time far ahead. Here, maybe just to close with the last question from the audience here. So will all of the sublease activity in the Bay Area and other cities due to companies right-sizing translate into a downturn in the market cycle, meaning lower rent rates due to higher vacancies? I don't know if Jeff, you'd have something about.
Yeah, so currently there has not been a rental adjustment. I think everyone just realizes that, without activity, there's no reason to, if, there's no transactions, there's no reason at this point to start dropping rental rates. Again, this is more the Silicon Valley. San Francisco, I think, is definitely different. With the amount of sublease space that is coming available there, I think there's going to be, more opportunities, and I think you will see a trend of reduced rental rates. But currently, we do not have that kind of situation going on in the Silicon Valley.
Okay. And maybe you would have a last question. Okay, actually a very good question. What actually excites you, all of you? I think it's the best way to close this panel. Anything? So maybe we can go back with starting with Gary, Jeff, Sam, and Scott. What excites you for the moment, and what are you looking forward to in the near future?
Yeah, listen, what I'm most excited by is that listen, this is a terrible tragedy and challenge that we're going through as a globe. But fortunately, the sector that we focus on, real estate, is just a slow-moving sector. And I'm hoping that some of the challenges that have been placed in front of us, that we'll start to move more quickly. We'll start to adopt technology in a more confident way, and ultimately, really try to figure out what people are looking for, and it's getting back to these great user experiences. So I'm hoping this is going to be a little bit catalyst for us to wake up a bit and to kind of get into gear and to really try to make some change in a short period of time.
Fair enough. Couldn't agree more. Jeff?
Completely agree with Gary. Again, our focus is in downtown San Jose, and again, there's many aspects to kind of a community, and I think this is a unique opportunity right now where there has been some businesses, especially on the retail side, that are not as fortunate to be able to pass through this pandemic, to create just kind of more of a vibrant city and come up with new activations and kind of creative ideas with other people that are within the community to really, drive people down to downtown San Jose. So I definitely look forward kind of for the coming months to try to come up with creative ideas to do that.
Great. Sam?
I'm just, I'm excited about conversations like this. I think that coming out of this, moving forward, creating a world that feels more just, more interesting, more worthy of our higher aspirations, I think is something I'm super excited about over the coming years.
Yeah. I agree, Sam, and I would just, the only thing I'd add is that we've learned a lot already. We've learned so much about how we're conducting virtual events. We have amazing events that we've hosted at Adobe, and the reach is far greater, whether it's to our employees or to our customers. We have we've discovered a lot about how to engage and how to create great experiences, and what I'm really excited about is blending these two things together, blending what we've learned about being virtual with what we already knew to be really great in-person experiences, to creating this new ecosystem of great experiences regardless of where you are. You don't have to be in the office to enjoy it, and you're not forced to be at home to enjoy it. You can participate wherever you are.
That's amazing. I mean, thank you again so much for all your input today. I mean, unfortunately, we're a bit short on time, but again, Sam, Scott, Jeff, Gary, today's masterclass was definitely very interesting. And yeah, I mean, we should definitely have more events that create this kind of brainstorming in order to go further, at least on the built environment side. And yeah, I mean, thank you again so much. And this will be it. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.